Hi, I'm Ashton Lewis, Technical Product Manager at RahrBSG, here to talk about the enzyme ALDC. ALDC stands for alpha-acetolactate decarboxylase, and this enzyme converts the precursor to diacetyl outside of the yeast cell directly into a tasteless and odorless compound called acetone. So the reason that ALDC is such a cool enzyme is that ordinarily this precursor, alpha-acetolactate, slowly oxidizes into diacetyl outside of the yeast cell. And when I say oxidizes, that's a chemical reaction that either involves oxygen or oxidizing ions like iron or copper can also cause the oxidation. But that's a relatively slow reaction. Now once that diacetyl is formed outside of the yeast cell, healthy yeast cells toward the end of fermentation will take up diacetyl back into the cell and chemically reduce the diacetyl into a compound, acetone or 2,3-butanediol. So both of those compounds are odorless. Now what the enzyme ALDC, or alpha-acetolactate decarboxylase, does is that it quickly converts that precursor outside of the yeast cell in beer into this acetone without ever going to diacetyl. And effectively what that means is that beer that's been treated with ALDC will never have any perceptible amount of diacetyl. So that's what it does. Now why is that important? Well, there's a couple reasons why ALDC is important to brewers. One is that it helps meet your diacetyl spec if you have a low specification for diacetyl. So whether you're making clean pilsners or lagers or IPAs that you do not want to have any diacetyl in, the ALDC will help you meet your diacetyl spec. The other thing that ALDC does is it shortens the aging period. So as I mentioned before, that conversion of diacetyl into 2,3-butanediol is a slow reaction that requires healthy yeast. Well, that's not always true at the end of fermentation, so that diacetyl reduction phase can take time. With ALDC, there's no diacetyl rest that's required. It happens very quickly. So those are the reasons to use it for diacetyl spec and to basically shorten your process time. So how do you use it? Well, it's super easy to use. You can add ALDC before fermentation begins. That's true of all types of beers that are treated with ALDC. So typically you add that when the fermenter is being filled and before yeast metabolism ever begins. The other place to add ALDC, and this is only with beers that are dry hopped, is to add a second dose of ALDC with your dry hops. So why are you adding it with your dry hops? Well, dry hopping, as we all know, can lead to hop creep. And during this so-called hop creep, where enzymes and hops break down dextrins and make fermentable sugars, there's another place where fermentation picks up and there's a spike of diacetyl that can occur following dry hopping. And that diacetyl spike following dry hopping can be very problematic for breweries waiting to hit that diacetyl spec, because that uptake of diacetyl after dry hopping can be very slow because the rate of fermentation has slowed down and the yeast are not as healthy as they were at the beginning of fermentation. So you either add it at the beginning of fermentation for all beers, or when you dry hop, you would add a second dose of the ALDC. So that's how it's used. Really not a whole lot to say other than that, because it's just one of those enzymes that's like a game changer for a lot of breweries. In fact, when ALDC first was introduced into the market over 20 years ago, there were very few small breweries that used it. But as breweries became more familiar with ALDC and its benefits, today it's become a very common enzyme, and it's one of our best-selling enzymes at RahrBSG. If you have other questions about this enzyme or other products that we sell, please reach out to your sales manager, customer service rep, or me, Ashton Lewis, directly. So say bye-bye to butter bombs. Cheers.